A question I used to ask myself all the time is, Kari, what is it going to take? So, my question to you today is seriously, what will it take before you finally make a change that you've been thinking about? The change. Will it be another embarrassing night? Another promise that you break to yourself? Or another argument with a loved one? Or how about a health scare? Losing someone? Or could today be enough? Because here's what I've learned after walking this road myself and coaching hundreds of people, that every single one of us has had our own version of what I call your own enough. The question is, do you get to choose it, or will life choose it for you? That's what we're talking about today. Welcome to Beyond the Gray, the podcast about gray area drinking and how it impacts your health, relationships, purpose, and faith. This is where we have real conversations about the topics successful men over 50 don't usually talk about out loud. If you've built a great life but keep asking, is this it? You're not alone. When alcohol becomes your go-to off switch and your marriage, health, or purpose feel disconnected, you're in the right place. I'm your host, Kari Schwear, and this, my friend, is where the gray ends. Welcome back, or welcome into Beyond the Gray. If you're new here, thank you for being here. I truly hope that today's conversation blesses you in an immense way. But I also want to share, it's not all about alcohol, although I will be sharing my own story. And if you've been around long enough, you probably know a little bit about my story. But this episode is about change, and more specifically, why intelligent, successful people like you end up staying stuck after they know that something isn't serving them. Why do we do that? And by the end of this episode, I want you to be able to understand why change usually takes longer than we think or we want, and why people don't need a rock bottom. Can I tell you, I was almost waiting for a rock bottom to happen before I made a change. I want to share with you why you don't have to wait for that to happen. And also how to recognize when the seed of change has already been planted for you. I did a whole episode on that. I'll put that in the show notes. And lastly, how to choose your own enough before it chooses you. Because I got to tell you, there's a lot of agency that happens when you're the one who gets to decide when that will be. So I want you to imagine this one giant moment that happens. It's like this lightning bolt, a dramatic wake-up call, if you will, the rock bottom. That's rarely how any of this works, by the way. I thought that too. I literally thought that once I got a DUI, then I'd be forced into change. But let me back up a little bit and share some of my stories that weren't enough. They might have sounded like they were enough to somebody else, but they weren't. It just kept compounding one after another after years of doing stupid stuff. And I bet you've been there yourself. So I actually did a recent social media post about this, that on 4th of July, 2016, I ended up jumping into a pool with just my bra and my underwear on because I was so drunk. And I didn't care. That was the thing. I was amongst friends, and so I just figured, why put on a bathing suit? But then the problem was when I got out of the pool, I had some wet garments, and you get the picture. That same night, by the way, was my own enough, and I'll get there. Let me tell you a couple more stories because it continues. Then there was the night of the Tony Bennett and Lady Gaga concert in New York City. We had been waiting months for this thing, and it was pretty pricey, if I remember. And we went with some friends. We walked all day in New York City, and guess what we did while we were walking? We would stop at certain bars and have another glass of wine or a little cocktail. And ended up passing out on my husband's shoulder during the concert, like 5 minutes in, after yelling, Gaga, I love you, and making a complete fool out of myself. But yeah, that whole episode wasn't enough for me to really make any sort of change, just like jumping in a pool with my bra and underwear on. And then there's the other story of me literally saying a nasty word that starts with S in front of 700 people that had their head bowed in prayer at my husband's work event. Oh yes, I had my hand on the door to the ballroom, and a bartender asked me a question if I remembered to bring him tip money, and I said, "Oh, schneizers," although I didn't say that word. I said the other word as I was opening up the door, and as you can imagine, all 700 people with their head bowed in prayer looked up at me. I literally wanted to crawl under a rock. My husband ripped off my name tag off of my dress because he was so embarrassed to be seen with me and to admit that, yes, that's my wife. But you know what? That still wasn't enough for me to make any changes. Nope. The night in the episode that was enough was the night that I told my son to blankety blank off and to shut the blank off because he made a comment that I was really trashed when I came home that 4th of July evening of July 4th, 2016, which, by the way, by the time you hear this episode, it's been 10 years. That was enough. Here's what happened. He told me the next day what I had said to him because I had forgotten. And when he told me what I said, I can't tell this story without getting teared up, honestly. Oh my gosh. It's been a while since I verbalized all this out loud, so bear with me. That was my enough. Hearing him repeat back to me how ugly I was to him was mortifying. Now, I want you to know that prior to that night happening, I had been thinking about my drinking for a while, which we'll get into that in a second here. So it was already on my mind. And I kept thinking I needed a rock bottom for that to happen in order for me to want to make a change. But hearing your own flesh and blood repeat back to you words that no mom should ever say to their child, granted he was 23 at the time, doesn't matter. I said those words to him, and that became my enough. Now, I didn't quit drinking right away. Took another 6 weeks, and we'll get into that in a minute. But I want to ask you, why do you think the pool incident wasn't enough? Or the concert for me? Why wasn't the embarrassment itself enough of saying a swear word in front of 700 people and having my husband super mad at me? Why was it my son then? And you know what I realized years later? That none of those moments changed my identity. But that night with my son did. Because I became someone I never wanted to become. That's the difference. This is about our identity and your identity. What is the line that you hope that you never cross? Because perhaps that's your own enough. Have you ever even thought about it? Like I said, I kept thinking one day when I get a DUI, then I'll make a decision to work on my relationship with alcohol. But why do I even have to get to that place? How about for you? Have you actually thought about what that enough moment is for you? Because I believe everybody has that enough. And you know what? Coaching has shown me that this isn't just my story. I hear them all the time. One of the most dramatic stories that I have from a client is that he went away on a business trip with colleagues and his customers, and they drank all night. They were in a very popular city and one that is known for partying. And he got so drunk that he ended up passing out and getting sick and needing his customers and his colleagues to take care of him, which meant getting him into his hotel room, cleaning him up, getting him into bed. That was his enough. It was the embarrassment. It was the disgust that he had. That's what finally drove him over the edge to say, that's it. Another client I had, his enough was that his wife left. She packed a bag and she said, I'm done. I'm done. I've been trying to deal with you. I've been asking you. I've been trying so hard. And here's the thing. No other person can force you to come to a place of your own enough. That is something that only you can decide. So while his wife was nagging at him, that wasn't enough. But what was enough was the act of her leaving. It hurt, and it hurt him badly. And another was when the doctor looked at her in her eyes and said, you can't continue like this. You have issues with your organs. You're dealing with this. Now, this is a woman who was not a heavy drinker. She was truly a gray area drinker. But her choice of drinking paired with not taking care of herself in other areas, that became her enough. It wasn't until she was told that she was going to be severely sick if she didn't correct it right then and there. That became her enough. So, everybody's enough is different. And most people aren't waiting for a rock bottom, maybe like I was. They're waiting for certainty. They're waiting for something big enough that the decision gets made for them. Nobody wants a rock bottom, whatever that even means. It's a different explanation for everybody. And I get it because it's understandable. Like I said, that's where I was. But if life forces the decision, right, then we don't own it. If it forces us, we can't take agency over it. When we make that decision ahead of time, it gives us more power. And that's what I want to share with you today. That all of us as human beings are wired to avoid change. We don't like it. We want comfort. We all want comfort. We love familiarity. Our brains love it. Even unhealthy, familiar feels safer than healthy, unfamiliar. The brain predicts survival through patterns. It's wired to survive, not necessarily thrive. When you think about how our brains were formed, all the information that we learn as we're young and we grow, it's the lower part of the brain, that's where it stores automatic behavior, like learning how to drive, learning how to brush your teeth, right? So these are all things that our brain likes to be efficient. So it learns patterns. And when that happens and we start to drink, that becomes a pattern. Or when we do something of another behavior that we don't want to be doing, that we need to be focusing on, or that God is convicting you on to make some changes, we say no to that because we like something that feels familiar, even if it is unhealthy. That's why you're going to hear yourself say, hey, nothing bad has happened yet. I'm probably okay. And other people drink more than I do. Other people do X, Y, and Z worse than me. And then we go into comparison. And then we think that that's normal. We think it's normal that we compare ourselves to other people because they're doing it, it's okay for us. We're moving the goalposts every time. Like I said, maybe you didn't get a DUI. Maybe you didn't have an embarrassing moment at a big city and had people take care of you. Maybe you still have your job and there's been no consequences. Maybe your marriage is okay. Most likely, you're probably functioning very well. You know, I wasn't comparing myself to healthy people, I can tell you that. I was comparing myself to people who were worse than me, so I would feel better. And that's the trap. That's the trap we find ourselves in. So I want to share a concept with you that I think is so important, and this is one of my favorite concepts. I've talked about it before in another episode, which I already alluded to, and I'll put that episode number in the show notes. But sometimes change just starts with the tiniest little whisper inside. It doesn't have to be a crisis. It's just an internal question that we have. Maybe that's why you're listening today. Perhaps a seed had been planted for you. Maybe you saw a previous episode and you were curious to click on this one, or maybe you saw a social media post or somebody recommended this episode to you, or you just stumbled upon it on YouTube, however you found it. Maybe that's why you're here and you're listening. Maybe another reason is you've been wondering about how to curb your habits and the things that you're doing. Maybe you're just plain old tired, or maybe you're just curious. And here's the thing. Don't ignore that curiosity, because it is often the very first evidence that something inside you already knows. You can call it intuition. You can call it the Holy Spirit within, which is what I call it. You can call it whatever you want. I don't care. But here's the thing. Pay attention to it. Because if internally you're hearing voices and you're feeling this nudge, pay attention to it. Because can I tell you, it knows more than you in this moment. Especially when we start to justify, compare, and think that somebody else is worse off than us, and it makes it feel like we're okay. It's not always okay. And I'll tell you something else, that most of the people that I work with are leaders. And the best leaders in business, they don't wait until the company is burning down or that they're losing money. They pivot and they do it very quickly. They adjust, they anticipate what's about to happen. So why do we wait so long in our own personal lives? Why do we hand our future over to chance and wait for something to happen or a decision to be made for us? Can I tell you that the strongest decision that you can make is deciding before you're forced into it? That's real leadership. It's also agency. You know, I want to tell you that my enough wasn't actually that night with my son. It was the start of it. It was what promoted me to make some change. But you know what happened? It actually took 6 more weeks for me to really be honest with myself. I wrestled during those 6 weeks. I questioned. I was scared. But something did shift in me. That seed that had been planted, I thought about this, guys, for 2 years before I actually made the decision to move forward and address my relationship with alcohol. I had multiple seeds planted over that time frame. And that seed finally took root. I couldn't unknow what I now knew. It was unbelievable. It was like somebody just handed me a mirror with a flashlight and said, "Hey girl, this is about you." I had nowhere to go. I could not hide from that truth anymore. And I had to ask myself those questions. And I want to ask you some questions today, because I really want you to sit with these questions and really think about them for yourself. What's your not enough story? I'm sure you have a few. Maybe you've already had it. Are you ignoring it? Are you waiting for something worse to happen? What are you hoping happens before you finally decide? I mean, hoping or expecting or waiting? And what if this conversation today, you listening to this, is enough? Could it be just enough? I want to say, if today's episode stirred something up in you, please don't ignore it. You don't have to have all the answers right now. You don't. You don't even have to know exactly what you want yet. Maybe you're not ready, and that's okay. Maybe you're still just asking questions, and that's a good thing. I like questions. It's the bravest thing that you can do is simply to have an honest conversation with yourself and maybe with somebody else. If that's where you are, I would love to talk with you. There is no pressure, no sales pitch, no judgment. Just you and me having an honest conversation about where you are and really where you want to go. I'll put a link to book a call with me in the show notes if that's something that you want to do. You don't have to wait until life forces your hand. You don't have to wait until the damage is so big that you've destroyed a lot. You don't have to earn the right to make any change. And sometimes the simplest thing that you can say is simply, I've had enough. I've seen enough. I'm tired. I'm ready. And maybe today, that is your enough. I'm really glad that you decided to spend some time with me on this episode and listening. And do me a favor, if you haven't yet, will you subscribe and follow the show and comment and leave a 5-star review if you find this content valuable? It really does help the show grow and reach more people just like you. I'm Kari Schwear, your host, and remember, my friend, that there truly is life beyond the gray and well beyond needing any sort of rock bottom. I'm here for you, and I believe in you. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.